The rain was relentless that October morning in 2024, drumming against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Seattle apartment. I, Emily Carter, 34, stood at my kitchen counter, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, staring at a cream-colored envelope that seemed out of place among the usual stack of bills and takeout menus. Its elegant calligraphy and embossed gold border screamed formality, a rarity in my world of digital notifications and hurried emails. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the handwriting my mother Susan's precise, almost mechanical script. It was an invitation to my younger sister Clara's engagement party, set for next month at our parents' lakefront home in Bellevue, just across Lake Washington. Clara, my best friend and confidant since childhood, had called me 2 weeks ago, her voice bubbling with joy, to share the news of her engagement to Nathan Pierce, a soft-spoken software engineer she'd met at a tech conference in San Francisco. You're going to be my maid of honor, right? She'd asked, her words warm with certainty. I'd laughed, promising to make her wedding day unforgettable, already picturing us flipping through bridal magazines and giggling over venue options. But as I slid the invitation from its envelope, my excitement curdled into confusion. The card was addressed to my boyfriend, David Nguyen, with a handwritten note. Bring a guest if you'd like. No mention of me. No separate invitation. No acknowledgement of my promised role as maid of honor. I turned the envelope over, half expecting my name to appear somewhere. Anywhere. But it was blank. My apartment, with its minimalist furniture and view of the gray Seattle skyline, suddenly felt colder, the rain outside mirroring the unease settling in my chest. Clara and I had always been a unit, two sisters against the world, sharing late-night secrets and dreams of the future. Growing up in our parents' sprawling Bellevue homes, I'd been her protector, her guide, the one who taught her how to ride a bike and helped her navigate the cliques of high school. Our mother, Susan, a former interior designer with a knack for control, had always favored Clara, the creative daughter with her watercolor paintings and infectious laugh, while I, the practical one, was expected to keep things together. Our father, Richard, a retired architect, preferred silence over confrontation, fading into the background whenever Susan's sharp edges surfaced. I'd learned early to be the family's problem solver, the one who fixed leaks, balanced budgets, and smoothed over conflicts. This invitation, or lack thereof, felt like a mistake, a clerical error born of wedding stress. Clara had been swamped. After all, she worked as a graphic designer, her days filled with freelance projects and late-night sketches. A marketing strategist at a fast-paced Seattle startup, knew how chaos could consume you. I called her, expecting her usual warmth, but her voice was clipped, distracted. Oh, I meant to tell you Mom's handling the invites. It's just easier that way. Can we talk later? I'm swamped with wedding stuff. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my phone, the screen glowing with unanswered questions. I brushed it off, telling myself it was nothing. But as the days passed, the unease grew. My text to Clara about wedding plans, venue ideas, color schemes, dress shopping went unanswered or met with vague replies. Mom's got it covered, or we'll figure it out soon. I threw myself into work, pitching campaigns for tech clients and staying late at the office. But the silence from Clara gnawed at me. The engagement party was my first chance to see the family together since Clara's announcement. I drove across the floating bridge to Bellevue, the lake's dark waters reflecting the overcast sky. Our parents' home, a modern glass and wood estate with floor-to-ceiling windows, loomed ahead, its sleek design a testament to Susan's taste and Richard's architectural past. I expected the familiar chaos of family gatherings, Clara's laughter, Dad's quiet jokes, Mom's pointed comments. Instead, I walked into a scene that felt curated, almost staged. Clara was radiant in a blush pink dress, her dark hair swept into a loose bun, laughing with Nathan and a group of friends I didn't recognize. Susan presided over the event like a queen, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile polished but sharp. Richard hovered at the edges, nursing a glass of bourbon, his eyes avoiding mine. And there, at Clara's side, was our cousin Lauren, a social media influencer with a penchant for inserting herself into family moments. Her Instagram was a curated shrine to her life, filled with selfies and blessed captions. "Emily, you made it," Susan said, her tone cool as she air-kissed my cheek. "I wasn't sure you'd have time with your busy job." The jab stung, but I smiled, searching for Clara. When I finally caught her eye, she gave me a quick hug before being whisked away by Lauren to greet more guests. The party buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of a jazz quartet, but I felt like an outsider in my own family's story. I mingled, making small talk with distant relatives and Nathan's colleagues. But my eyes kept drifting to Clara and Lauren, their heads bent together, laughing over something I wasn't privy to. Susan flitted from group to group, her laughter too loud, her glances at me too brief. Richard stayed on the periphery, his silence louder than ever. As the night wore on, I overheard snippets of conversation that deepened my unease. "Clara's so lucky to have Lauren helping with the wedding," a family friend said to Susan. "She's got such an eye for detail." Susan nodded, her smile smug. "Lauren's been a godsend. Emily's so busy with her career." You know, the words cut deeper than I expected. I'd always been the one Clara turned to, the one who planned birthday parties and fixed crises. Now, Lauren was taking my place, and Susan was orchestrating it. I left the party early, citing a work deadline. But the truth was, I couldn't bear the growing distance between me and Clara. The drive back to Seattle was a blur of rain and headlights, my mind replaying Susan's words, Clara's distracted hug, Lauren's triumphant grin. Back in my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and scrolled through Lauren's Instagram. Her stories were filled with wedding planning moments, venue tours, floral samples, even a selfie with Clara at a bridal boutique. My heart sank. Clara and I had dreamed of dress shopping together since we were kids, draping blankets over our shoulders as makeshift veils, promising to be there for each other's big moments. I texted Clara, "Saw Lauren's post about the boutique? When's the next trip? I'd love to come." Her reply came hours later. "Oh, it was last minute. Mom set it up. I'll call you soon." She didn't call. The next morning, I woke to a new post from Lauren, a photo of her holding up a lace gown, Clara beaming in the background, Susan sipping champagne. The caption read, "Helping my favorite cousin find the dress. Wedding vibes." I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold, the ache in my chest sharpening into something I couldn't name. I confided in David over dinner that night, my voice trembling as I recounted the party, the invitation, the Instagram posts. "Maybe Clara's just overwhelmed," he said, his voice steady, always the voice of reason. "You're both busy. Give it time." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. Susan's favoritism had always been a fact of our childhood. Clara was the golden child, her art projects framed and praised, while my academic achievements were met with a curt, "good job." I'd accepted it, even embraced it, taking pride in being the reliable one. But this felt different. This felt deliberate, determined to stay involved. I threw myself into wedding planning. I spent $3,000 on a deposit for a photographer Clara had raved about, a local artist known for capturing candid moments. I curated custom gift bags for out-of-town guests, spending $1.500 on locally sourced coffee, artisanal chocolates, and Seattle-themed trinkets. I even began secretly arranging a surprise honeymoon, a week-long stay at a vineyard estate in Napa Valley, complete with private wine tastings and a hot air balloon ride, costing $9,000. I imagined Clara's face when I revealed the gift, pictured us laughing over wine, our sisterhood restored. But every step I took was overshadowed by Susan's decisions. She booked a grand historic mansion in downtown Seattle as the venue, announcing it at a family dinner without consulting me or Clara. "It's perfect for Clara's vision," she said, her tone final. When I suggested a lavender color scheme Clara loved, Susan dismissed it as too muted, opting for bold golds and reds. Clara nodded along, her smile strained but compliant. It's fine," she said when I pulled her aside. "Mom's excited, and she's covering most of the costs. Let's not make it a big deal." I bit my tongue, swallowing my frustration. I wanted Clara's day to be perfect, even if it meant stepping back. But the exclusion grew. Lauren's posts multiplied cake tastings, floral consultations, a bachelorette weekend in Vegas. I wasn't invited to. My role as maid of honor felt like a hollow title, a promise unfulfilled. I kept contributing, paying for a string ensemble Clara loved too, and a vintage hairpin to match our grandmother's earrings, $200. But the distance between us widened. Clara's texts became one-word replies, her calls non-existent. I told myself it was temporary, that we'd reconnect after the wedding. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The Seattle winter settled in, gray and damp, mirroring the fog of unease that clouded my days. It was late November 2024. And the wedding planning for Clara's June 2025 nuptials was in full swing. But my role as maid of honor felt increasingly like a formality. I kept pouring my heart into the process, hoping to bridge the growing gap between me and my sister. I spent hours researching vendors, curating Pinterest boards with Clara's favorite aesthetics: soft pastels, fairy lights, rustic elegance. I sent her ideas for centerpieces, suggested local caterers known for farm-to-table menus, and even sketched out a timeline for the reception. But every suggestion was met with vague responses or outright dismissal. "Mom's handling that." Clara texted when I asked about floral arrangements. "We've got it covered," she said when I offered to join a venue walkthrough. The rejection stung, but I pressed on, determined to make her day special. Susan's influence was inescapable. At a family dinner in early December, held at a trendy Capitol Hill restaurant to discuss the wedding budget, she arrived with a leather-bound planner I'd never seen before. "I've secured the mansion for June 12th, she announced, barely glancing at me as she sipped her martini. It was the only date available, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. Clara looked surprised but pleased, her eyes lighting up. "Mom, that's amazing!" But Em and I were still looking at other venues. Susan waved a hand dismissively. "Darling, the mansion books up years in advance. We're lucky I got a cancellation. Besides, it's where I always pictured your wedding." She shot me a triumphant glance, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I clenched my napkin under the table, forcing a nod. Clara squeezed my hand, but her gesture felt more apologetic than reassuring. That dinner marked the beginning of Susan's takeover. Vendors. I'd researched photographers, caterers. Florists were replaced with her friends' recommendations. The lavender and sage color scheme, Clara and I had spent weeks refining was scrapped for golds and reds, which Susan deemed more sophisticated. When I voiced concerns to Clara, she shrugged. Mom's really into this. It makes things easier, and she's paying for most of it. I swallowed my frustration, reminding myself that Clara was under pressure, but the exclusions piled up. I learned through Lauren's Instagram that she'd joined Clara and Susan for a cake tasting at a renowned Seattle bakery. Another post showed them at a floral shop, Lauren holding up a bouquet of peonies, while Clara laughed. I wasn't invited to either. When I texted Clara, asking why, she replied, "It was spontaneous. Mom set it up. Next time." Okay. But next time never came. The first real blow landed in January 2005. When I discovered Clara had gone dress shopping without me, I found out by accident, scrolling through Lauren's Instagram stories during a lunch break at my office. There she was, holding up a lace gown in a boutique, Clara beaming in the background, Susan sipping champagne. The caption read, "Helping my favorite cousin find the dress. Wedding vibes." My heart sank. Clara and I had dreamed of this moment since we were teenagers, draping blankets over our shoulders as makeshift veils, promising to be there for each other's milestones. I texted Clara, keeping my tone light. "Looked like fun at the boutique. When's the next trip?" Her reply came hours later. "Oh, it was last minute. Mom set it up. I'll call you soon." She didn't call. I stared at my phone, the screen blurring as tears welled up. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, but the ache in my chest told a different story. I confided in David that evening, my voice trembling as I showed him Lauren's posts. "Maybe Clara's just caught up in the excitement," he said, his dark eyes steady. "You've been slammed at work. It's probably not personal." But it felt personal. My role as maid of honor was being erased, replaced by Lauren's presence and Susan's control. I kept contributing, paying $1.500 for custom gift bags filled with Seattle coffee, artisanal chocolates, and hand-painted cards for out-of-town guests. I spent $2.00 on a string ensemble Clara loved. Imagining her face when they played her favorite ballad at the ceremony, I even continued planning the surprise honeymoon, a 9,000 package for a week in Napa Valley, with private wine tastings, a hot air balloon ride, and a stay in a vineyard estate. I pictured presenting it to Clara at the rehearsal dinner, our sisterhood restored in a moment of shared joy. But the distance grew. Clara stopped joining our weekly Sunday brunches, a tradition we'd kept since college. Her excuses were flimsy work deadlines, wedding errands, a vague "I'm just busy." When we did speak, our conversations were shallow, lacking the depth of our late-night talks about dreams and fears. I tried to address it directly. "Clara, is everything okay between us?" I asked during a rare phone call. "Everything's fine," she said, her voice distant. "I'm just swamped with wedding stuff. Mom's been amazing, handling everything." The mention of Susan felt like a jab, but I let it go, hoping time would mend the rift. The final straw came in late February, 3 months before the wedding. I was working late, finalizing a campaign for a tech client, when a coworker, Sarah, mentioned seeing Clara and Susan at a bridal expo downtown. "I thought you'd be there," she said, her brow furrowing. It looked like a big deal. I hadn't been invited. The realization hit like a punch. I called Clara that night, my voice shaking. "Why am I being left out of everything? I'm supposed to be your maid of honor." There was a long pause. It's complicated. Mom thinks you're too stressed with work. She's just trying to make things easier." The excuse was hollow, and for the first time, I sensed a deeper betrayal. Susan wasn't just taking over, she was pushing me out. I began to notice other signs. Lauren's Instagram posts now included her in planning meetings. I hadn't been told about choosing bridesmaid dresses, sampling menus, even planning a bachelorette weekend in Vegas. I offered suggestions based on years of knowing Clara's tastes, a rooftop venue for the rehearsal dinner, a playlist with her favorite indie bands, but they were dismissed. Lauren's handling that, Clara said when I mentioned the bachelorette party. She knows what I want now. The words cut deeper than I expected. I'd spent $3,000 on the photographer, $1, $500 on gift bags, $2,000 on the ensemble, and countless hours on the honeymoon. Yet, I was being replaced by our cousin, who seemed to revel in her new role. I confided in my best friend, Mia. Over coffee at a cozy Fremont cafe, the rain pattered against the windows as I poured out my fears. Susan's always favored Clara, I said, stirring my latte absently. But this feels different. It's like she's deliberately cutting me out. Mia frowned, her dark curls framing her face. I didn't want to say anything. But Susan's been talking about you. At the engagement party, she told my mom you were jealous of Clara's happiness. She said you're too controlling, that your job stress is making you difficult. I stared at her, stunned. Susan wasn't just excluding me from the wedding. She was undermining my reputation, planting seeds of doubt in our social circle. The revelation forced me to confront a truth I'd avoided. Susan's favoritism had always been there. Clara's art projects were celebrated. While my straight-A report cards were met with a nod, I'd compensated by being the reliable one, paying for Clara's art supplies when our parents couldn't, helping her through college when scholarships fell short. But now, Susan was rewriting the narrative, casting me as the problem. I called our Aunt Ellen, Richard's sister, seeking clarity. Susan did this to me years ago, Ellen said, her voice heavy. When she married your father, she spread lies to keep me away. She needs control, and you, independent. Successful threaten that. The words hit like a revelation, illuminating decades of subtle manipulations I'd normalized. I resolved to confront Clara, to demand answers. I texted her, asking for a private meeting, but Susan insisted on hosting it at their Bellevue home. It's better if we're all together, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. I agreed, hoping for a heart-to-heart with Clara. Instead, I was walking into something far worse, a moment that would shatter the illusion of our family and force me to face a betrayal I never saw coming. The March wind howled outside my parents' Bellevue home as I pulled into the driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel under my tires doing little to calm my nerves. It was early March 2025, 3 months before Clara's wedding, and I'd requested a meeting with her to clear the air about my diminishing role as maid of honor. Susan had insisted on hosting, claiming it would be more comfortable at their house. I arrived with a heart full of hope, rehearsing words that would express my hurt without accusation. Clara and I had been inseparable for 30 years. Surely we could navigate this rift. But as I stepped through the front door, the air felt heavy, charged with a tension I couldn't place. The sleek, modern living room, with its white leather furniture and lake views, looked more like a stage than a home. Susan greeted me at the door, her blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon, her smile as polished as the marble floors. "Emily, we're in the living room," she said curtly, turning without waiting for a response. I followed, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The scene inside felt orchestrated, like a scene from one of Susan's carefully curated dinner parties. Richard sat in his usual armchair, his face drawn, a glass of bourbon untouched in his hand. Clara perched on the edge of the sofa, her fingers twisting a tissue, her eyes fixed on the floor. And there, in the spot where I'd always sat during family discussions, was Lauren, her posture relaxed but her eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite name. Triumph. Perhaps. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of a minimalist clock on the mantel, each second amplifying my unease. "What's going on?" I asked, remaining standing when no one offered me a seat. "Clara, I thought we were talking about the wedding." Susan interjected before Clara could speak, her voice sharp and authoritative. "That's why we're all here. Emily, we need to discuss your role in the wedding." A strange calm settled over me, like the stillness before a storm. "My role as maid of honor," I clarified, looking at Clara, hoping for a sign of our old connection. Susan stepped forward, her posture rigid. "We've been discussing things, and we've all agreed that your involvement has become problematic." "Problematic," I echoed, my gaze fixed on Clara, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. Susan's voice took on a patronizing tone, one I'd heard countless times growing up. "Your controlling behavior. Your need to make everything about yourself. You're causing stress, Emily. And Clara deserves a peaceful wedding." The words hit like a slap, but it was Clara's silence that cut deepest. I'd spent $3,000 on the photographer, $1,500 on gift bags, $2,000 on the string ensemble, and $9,000 on a surprise honeymoon to Napa Valley. I'd poured my heart into her day, yet here I was, accused of sabotaging it. "Clara," I said, my voice breaking, "is this what you want?" Susan answered again, stepping partially between us. "It's what's best for everyone. Your presence would make the wedding impossible." The room seemed to tilt, the lake beyond the windows blurring into a gray haze. "My presence at the planning." "You mean?" I asked, clinging to a shred of hope. Susan's lips curved into a smirk, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. "We all agreed. You're not welcome at the wedding, not as maid of honor, not as a bridesmaid, not as a guest." The words landed like a physical blow, each syllable deliberate, as if she'd rehearsed them for maximum impact. Lauren shifted in her seat, her expression smug but guarded. Richard stared at the floor, his knuckles white around his glass. Clara's eyes glistened with tears, but she said nothing, her silence a betrayal sharper than any words. "When was this decided?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. "Weeks ago," Susan replied, her tone triumphant. "Clara asked Lauren to be maid of honor. It's official." I turned to Lauren, who met my gaze with a challenging look. "Congratulations," I said flatly, the absurdity of it all threatening to choke me. "It's nothing personal," she replied, the lie transparent. I almost laughed. Nothing personal about replacing me in my sister's wedding. In her life. "Clara," I tried one last time. "Is this really what you want?" Susan cut in again. "Clara wants a drama-free wedding. You've always been too controlling, too opinionated. The venue wasn't good enough. The caterer wasn't up to your standards." "That's not true," I interrupted, my composure cracking. "I've supported every decision, even when I wasn't consulted. I've spent thousands of dollars without being asked." Susan pointed an accusing finger. "There it is, throwing your money in our faces, using your financial contributions to control everything. That's exactly why you can't be there." I looked at Richard, silently pleading for him to speak. He met my eyes briefly, then looked away, his lifelong pattern of avoiding conflict winning out. The ticking clock filled the silence, marking the end of 30 years of sisterhood. "Good to know," I said, my voice eerily calm. I turned and walked toward the door, my movements mechanical. Behind me, Clara called my name once, softly, but no footsteps followed. No one stopped me. The drive back to Seattle was a blur of rain and headlights, my hands trembling on the wheel. I pulled over twice, tears blurring the road, my phone buzzing with texts I couldn't bring myself to read. When I reached my apartment, David was waiting, his face full of hope that crumbled when he saw me. "What happened?" he asked, pulling me into a hug. The story poured out in fragments. Susan's smirk, Clara's silence, Lauren's triumph, Richard's inaction. "They can't do this," David said, his voice thick with outrage. "You're her sister. You've done nothing but support her." But they had done it. Susan had orchestrated my exclusion, and Clara had let it happen. I spent the night awake, replaying the scene, searching for a misunderstanding, a way to fix it. But Susan's satisfied smirk left no room for doubt. By 4 a.m., I was at my kitchen table, a cold cup of tea beside me, cataloging my contributions to the wedding. The photographer deposit, $3,000. Gift bags, $1,500. The string ensemble, $2,000. The vintage hairpin for Clara's veil, $200. The calligrapher for place cards, $300. And the honeymoon first-class flights to Napa, $4,500. A private villa, $3,500. Private experiences like wine tastings and a hot air balloon ride, $1,000. Over $15,000 for a wedding. I was now banned from attending. In a moment of clarity, I opened my laptop and transferred the $9,000 honeymoon fund back to my account. I emailed the airline, resort, and travel agent, canceling each reservation with a polite explanation of changed plans. I called my credit card company, reporting unauthorized charges Susan had made for additional wedding favors and upgraded linens purchases. I'd never approved. By 7 a.m., I'd untangled my financial ties to the wedding. I sent a brief email to my boss, requesting a personal day, then turned off my phone. The silence was both terrifying and liberating. I spent the morning walking through Seattle's Pike Place Market, the bustle of vendors and tourists, a stark contrast to the ache in my chest. Clara and I had shared everything: secrets, dreams, sorrows. How could she sit silently while Susan banished me? How could she replace me with Lauren? I met Mia for lunch at a Fremont cafe, the rain pattering against the windows. I hadn't planned to tell her everything, but one look at my face and she knew. "They did what?" she exclaimed, loud enough to turn heads. "Your own mother said that to your face." I nodded, pushing my salad around my plate. And Clara just sat there. Mia's outrage was validating, a balm to the self-doubt that had plagued me. "There's something else," she said, her voice lowering. "Susan's been talking about you for months. At the engagement party, she told my mom you were jealous of Clara, that your work stress was making you unstable. She's been planting these ideas with everyone." The revelation hit like a second betrayal. Susan wasn't just excluding me, she was rewriting my story, casting me as the villain to justify her control. The Seattle rain had softened to a drizzle by mid-March 2025, but the storm inside me raged on. After the devastating family meeting at my parents' Bellevue home, where Susan had declared me unwelcome at Clara's wedding, I felt unmoored, like a boat cut loose in a squall. My apartment, once a sanctuary of clean lines and cozy throws, now felt claustrophobic. The city skyline beyond my windows, a blur of gray. I lay awake that night, replaying Susan's smirk, Clara's silence, Lauren's smug triumph, and Richard's averted gaze. The betrayal was a physical ache, a weight beneath my ribs that made every breath a struggle. Clara and I had shared 30 years of sisterhood, late-night confessions, shared dreams, and promises to always have each other's backs. How could she let Susan banish me from her wedding? How could she replace me with Lauren? By 4 a.m. Sleep was a lost cause. I sat at my kitchen table, a cold cup of chamomile tea beside me, and began cataloging my contributions to Clara's wedding. The photographer deposit, $3,000. Custom gift bags for out-of-town guests, $1. $500. The string ensemble for the ceremony, $2,000. A vintage hairpin to match our grandmother's earrings, $200. A calligrapher for hand-lettered place cards, $300. And the crown jewel, a surprise honeymoon to Napa Valley. First-class flights, $4. $500. A private vineyard villa, $3,500. And curated experiences like wine tastings and a hot air balloon ride, $1,000. Over 15 Zend poured from my savings into a wedding I was now barred from attending. The numbers stared back at me, a stark reminder of my misplaced trust. In a moment of clarity, I opened my laptop and logged into my banking app. With steady fingers, I transferred the $9,000 honeymoon fund back to my personal account. I emailed the airline, resort, and travel agent, canceling each reservation with a polite note about changed plans. I called my credit card company, reporting unauthorized charges Susan had made for additional wedding favors and upgraded linens purchases I'd never approved, totaling $1,200. By 7 a.m. I'd severed my financial ties to the wedding. The act felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, but the pain lingered, sharp and unrelenting. I sent a brief email to my boss, requesting a personal day, then turned off my phone. The silence was both terrifying and liberating. A momentary reprieve from the barrage of notifications, texts from Susan, a hesitant voicemail from Richard, nothing from Clara. I spent the morning wandering through Seattle's Pike Place Market, the bustle of vendors hawking flowers and fish, a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. The salty air and chatter of tourists couldn't drown out the questions looping in my head. Why had Clara stayed silent? How had Susan convinced her I was the problem? I stopped at a cafe overlooking the Puget Sound, nursing a latte as I scrolled through Lauren's Instagram. Her latest post showed her and Clara at a floral shop, laughing over a bouquet of roses. The caption, "Planning the perfect day with my bestie. Clara's wedding." The exclusion was a knife to the heart, but it was Susan's influence that cut deepest. She'd always favored Clara, praising her art while dismissing my achievements. I'd compensated by being the reliable one, paying for Clara's art supplies in high school, covering her rent during college when our parents' support fell short. But now, Susan was rewriting my role, casting me as the villain. I met my best friend, Mia, for lunch at a cozy Fremont cafe, the rain pattering against the windows like a soft drumbeat. I hadn't planned to tell her everything, but one look at my face and she knew. What's wrong?" she asked, her dark curls framing her concerned expression. The story spilled out: the ambush at the family meeting, Susan's accusations, Clara's silence, Lauren's smug presence. "They did what?" Mia exclaimed, loud enough to turn heads at nearby tables. "Your own mother banned you from the wedding." I nodded, pushing my salad around my plate, unable to eat. And Clara just sat there, said nothing. Mia's outrage was validating, a lifeline in the sea of self-doubt that had consumed me. "There's something else," she said, her voice lowering. "Susan's been talking about you for months. At the engagement party, she told my mom you were jealous of Clara's happiness, that your job stress was making you unstable. She's been saying it to everyone: friends, relatives, even Nathan's family." The revelation hit like a second betrayal. Susan wasn't just excluding me. She was orchestrating a campaign to undermine my reputation. Why would she do this? I whispered. More to myself than Mia. Control, Mia said simply. You're successful. Independent. Everything she's not. My mom always said Susan was jealous of you. Even when we were kids. The pieces began to align, decades of subtle digs. Backhanded compliments like, it's amazing you've done so well without a husband. The way Susan forgot to invite me to family events or framed my help as obligation. I'd normalized it, excused it as her personality. But this was deliberate, calculated manipulation. I reached out to my Aunt Ellen, Richard's sister, seeking clarity. We met at a quiet diner in Ballard, the kind of place with vinyl booths and endless coffee refills. Ellen, a retired teacher with a warm smile and sharp eyes, listened as I recounted the meeting. Susan did this to me years ago, she said, stirring sugar into her coffee. When she married your father, she spread lies to keep me away, said I'd insulted her, that I was trying to sabotage their relationship. By their wedding, I was persona non grata. She needs control. And you independent. Successful threatened that. The words were a revelation, illuminating a pattern I'd been blind to. Why didn't Dad stop her? I asked. Ellen sighed. Richard's always chosen peace over confrontation. It's his way of surviving her. The next call came unexpectedly. From Nathan, Clara's fiancé. It was late afternoon, and I was back in my apartment, staring at the lake through my rain-streaked windows. Emily, we need to talk, he said, his voice urgent. Clara's a mess. She didn't know about half the things Susan's done. My heart raced, a mix of hope and skepticism. What do you mean? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Nathan explained that Susan had manipulated Clara's phone, rerouting my texts to her own number and fabricating messages to make it seem like I was dismissive or too busy for wedding plans. Clara thought you were pulling away, he said. Susan showed her texts supposedly from you saying you hated her venue choices, that you were too stressed to care. When we confronted Susan, she admitted to creating a fake contact with your names, intercepting your messages, and responding as you. The depth of the deception was staggering. Susan hadn't just excluded me, she'd engineered a false narrative, convincing Clara I was the problem. Why didn't Clara tell me this herself? I asked, my voice tight. She's terrified you'll never speak to her again, Nathan said. Last night, after you left the meeting, Susan showed up at our apartment. She was unhinged, screaming about ungrateful children, demanding we choose sides. It got so bad the neighbors called security. My head spun. She thought the meeting was to reconcile things. Nathan continued. Susan told her you'd been bad-mouthing the wedding, that you needed to hear how hurt everyone was. Clara had no idea Susan was planning to ban you. The conversation left me reeling. But another shock was coming. The next morning, my work phone rang. It was Sarah, our office receptionist. Her voice hesitant. Emily, I hate to bother you on your day off, but there's a situation. Your mother's here, in the lobby, causing a scene. My stomach dropped. Susan had never visited my workplace. A sleek downtown office with glass walls and a view of the Space Needle. She'd shown little interest in my career as a marketing strategist. Beyond how my income benefited the family, what's she doing? I asked, grabbing my keys. She's telling everyone you've stolen money from her, that you're having a breakdown, Sarah said, lowering her voice. Mr. Thompson's trying to handle it, but she's getting loud. I drove to the office, my heart pounding. Susan was targeting my professional reputation, the one thing I'd built independently. When I arrived, I found her in the lobby, her voice carrying across the polished marble floor. You don't know what she's capable of, she shouted to a bewildered receptionist. She's always been troubled, Security was escorting her out, her blonde hair disheveled, her eyes wild. My colleagues watched, some with pity, others with curiosity. The embarrassment burned. A public violation of the life I'd worked so hard to create. Mr. Thompson, my supervisor, approached, his face kind but firm. Emily, take whatever time you need. Your work speaks for itself. No one's listening to this. But the damage was done. Susan had crossed a line. And I knew this wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about control. And she was willing to destroy me to keep it. The Seattle sky was a patchwork of clouds the next day, March 15, 2005, as I sat in a quiet Capitol Hill cafe, a neutral ground chosen for its distance from both my apartment and Clara's. I arrived early, my nerves frayed after Nathan's call and Susan's outburst at my office. A folder of evidence sat beside me, screenshots of my real text to Clara, bank statements showing my wedding contributions, emails confirming vendor bookings. I'd spent the previous night compiling it, a methodical act to anchor myself against the chaos of betrayal. Clara had agreed to meet, and Nathan was coming too, a small reassurance that this wasn't another ambush. I sipped my latte, watching the baristas steam milk and scribble orders, trying to steady my racing heart. I wanted answers. But more than that, I wanted my sister back. Clara arrived alone, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her usual confidence, the spark that lit up rooms, was dimmed, replaced by dark circles under her eyes and a hesitant step. She slid into the chair opposite me, her hands trembling as she set her purse down. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, her voice breaking. I nodded, waiting. "James isn't joining us?" I asked, using Nathan's middle name, a habit from our college days. "He's parking," she said. "I wanted a few minutes with just you first." The air between us was heavy, charged with months of unspoken hurt. I gave her space, sensing she was searching for words in a story that had unraveled beyond recognition. I don't know where to begin," Clara said finally, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I believed her. All these months, Mom's been showing me texts from you canceling plans, saying my wedding choices were tacky, that you were too busy with your important career. I thought you were pulling away. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a conversation labeled with my name. The messages were vicious, dismissing her venue as cheap, complaining about costs, mocking her taste in flowers. None of them were mine. "She created a fake contact with your name," Clara said, wiping her eyes. "Her number, but labeled as you. When I texted you, I was texting her, and she'd respond, pretending to be you. She deleted your real messages. I never got half the things you sent." The revelation was a punch to the gut. Susan's manipulation wasn't just exclusion, it was a calculated rewrite of our relationship. "What about when we saw each other?" I asked, struggling to process the deception. "Surely you could tell something was off?" Clara shook her head. "We barely saw each other these past months. Mom always had an excuse: your work, your stress. And when we did meet, she was there, twisting everything you said afterward, making it sound like you were judging me." Nathan arrived, setting 3 coffees on the table before taking a seat beside Clara. "Lisa, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice heavy. "I should have seen it sooner." "How did you figure it out?" I asked, my voice steady but my hands clenched. "The honeymoon cancellation," Nathan explained. "Clara got the notification and was confused she didn't even know about the Napa trip. Susan claimed you'd promised it but canceled it vindictively after being rightly excluded. But it didn't add up. Why would you spend thousands if you were as resentful as she said?" Clara interjected, her voice raw. So we started digging, checking phone records. Timestamps. Then we found a folder on Mom's tablet, full of screenshots of fake conversations she'd created to keep her story straight. I pushed my folder across the table. I brought my own evidence. I said, bank transfers, emails, everything. As Clara and Nathan reviewed the documents, proof of my 3,000 photographer deposit, $1, 500 gift bags, $2,000 ensemble, and more, their expressions shifted from shock to horror. The contrast between my actions and Susan's narrative was stark. That day at your parents' house, Nathan said, Clara thought we were meeting to clear up miscommunications. She had no idea Susan was planning to ban you. Clara gripped my hand, her voice breaking. I froze. When Mom said we'd all agreed, I was in shock. By the time I processed it, you were gone. I never wanted you out of my wedding. You're my sister, my best friend. I can't get married without you. The validation brought a rush of emotion I hadn't expected. For months, I'd been gaslit into questioning my own worth. We need to talk about Mom, I said, my voice steadying. This isn't normal. It's deliberate manipulation. Nathan nodded grimly. It gets worse. After you left, Clara confronted her. Susan admitted to everything, no remorse. Just excuses about protecting Clara from your influence. When Clara insisted on reinstating you as maid of honor, Susan threatened to pull all financial support and tell everyone Clara was having a breakdown. I murmured. Just like she's saying about me, Nathan confirmed. It's a pattern. She discredits anyone who challenges her. We spent the next hour mapping out Susan's manipulation, the fake texts, diverted invitations. Rumors spread through our social circle. Each revelation built a clearer picture of calculated emotional abuse spanning decades. I decided we needed a family intervention, a chance to lay out the truth. I've arranged a meeting tomorrow evening at Aunt Ellen's, I said, with Dad, Ellen, Grandma Rose, and Uncle Paul. Will you come? Clara nodded without hesitation. Of course. It's time everyone knew. The meeting took place at Ellen's cozy Queen Anne home, a stark contrast to the sterile grandeur of my parents' house. The living room, with its mismatched furniture and family photos, felt like a safe haven. I presented my evidence, methodically screenshots, bank statements, vendor emails. Ellen shared her own story of being excluded from Richard and Susan's wedding years ago, her voice steady but pained. Nathan described Susan's meltdown at their apartment, which had escalated to the point of security intervention. Richard sat silently, his face growing grayer with each revelation. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I knew some of it, he admitted. Not the extent, but enough. I should have done something long ago. He looked at me, eyes full of regret. I chose peace over protecting you. Emily, I'm sorry. Susan arrived late, expecting a budget discussion. Her confident stride faltered when she saw the assembled group and the evidence spread across Ellen's coffee table. What is this? She demanded, her eyes darting between us. A chance for truth, I said simply. What followed was a predictable cycle denial. Accusations of conspiracy, attempts to manipulate allies. When those failed, she unleashed a cold fury, then tears, claiming she only wanted what was best for Clara. But the evidence was irrefutable. Clara stood to face her, her voice steady. Emily is my maid of honor, as I always wanted. If you can't respect that, you'll attend as a guest only, with no say in the wedding. Susan's face contorted with shock. You choose her over your own mother. Clara didn't flinch. I'm choosing truth over manipulation. I'm choosing health over toxicity. Richard, for the first time, didn't back down. Deborah, enough. Look at the evidence. This stops now. The intervention didn't end neatly. Susan left in a fury, promising consequences, but something had shifted. The pattern of manipulation had been exposed, and we were no longer her pawns. As we left Ellen's house, Clara hugged me tightly, her tears soaking my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Em. I let her poison us." I hugged her back. The first step toward rebuilding what we'd lost. June 2025 arrived with a burst of sunlight, a rare break from Seattle's usual drizzle, as if the city itself was celebrating Clara's wedding day. The historic mansion in downtown Seattle, with its ivy-covered walls and stained glass windows, stood ready for the ceremony. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of tentative healing and hard-won boundaries. After the family intervention at Ellen's house, Susan had agreed to a limited role in the wedding, no unilateral decisions, no vendor meddling, no attempts to manipulate. Her compliance was strained, her smiles tight, but it was a start. Clara and I had spent late nights rebuilding our sisterhood, talking through the pain of Susan's deception, grieving the months we'd lost to her lies. Richard, my father, surprised us all by standing firm, attending therapy to confront decades of passivity. The wedding was a chance to test this fragile new normal, but I carried both hope and caution as I stepped into my role as maid of honor. I reinstated a scaled-down honeymoon package for Clara and Nathan, a 4-day stay in Napa Valley, with a private villa and a single wine tasting, costing $5,000. This is a gift, freely given. I told them when I presented the itinerary. No strings attached. The gesture felt right, a reflection of my new understanding of healthy giving. I'd also resumed my wedding duties, coordinating bridesmaids and finalizing details, but with clear boundaries. I wouldn't deplete my savings or sacrifice my well-being to manage others' emotions. My therapist, Dr. Larson, had been instrumental in this shift, helping me recognize patterns of people-pleasing that had made me vulnerable to Susan's manipulation. "Your worth isn't tied to what you do for others," she'd said, her words becoming a mantra as the wedding approached. The morning of the wedding, I helped Clara into her dress in a sunlit suite overlooking the mansion's gardens. The gown, a cascade of ivory lace, was one I hadn't seen her choose, a reminder of the moments Susan had stolen from us. As I adjusted her veil, Clara caught my reflection in the mirror. "I wish we could erase the last few months," she said softly, her eyes glistening. "I don't," I replied, surprising myself. As painful as it was, it brought the truth into the open. "We can build something healthier now." She turned, radiant, and hugged me tightly. "When did my big sister get so wise?" she teased. "Around the time my little sister got so brave," I said, smiling through tears. The moment was bittersweet, a blend of joy and the lingering ache of what we'd endured. The ceremony was flawless, the mansion's ballroom glowing with candlelight and peonies. I stood beside Clara, holding her bouquet as she and Nathan exchanged vows, their words raw and authentic. Susan sat in the front row beside Richard, her composure perfect, her eyes occasionally meeting mine with an unreadable expression. Lauren, relegated to a minor role as a bridesmaid, kept her distance, her usual bravado subdued. Richard, for the first time, seemed present, his eyes misty as he watched Clara. The reception followed in the mansion's courtyard, strings of fairy lights twinkling above tables laden with Pacific Northwest salmon and local wines. I gave a short speech as maid of honor, my voice steady as I spoke of Clara's courage and our unbreakable bond. The guests applauded, but Susan's clap was perfunctory, her smile a mask. During the cocktail hour, as I adjusted cards on the gift table, Susan approached, her heels clicking on the stone patio. "The calligraphy is beautiful," she said, her voice softer than usual. "That was your doing." wasn't it? I braced for a veiled criticism, but her expression held something rare, genuine appreciation. Yes, I said simply. Clara loves hand lettering. Susan nodded, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. You've always noticed those details about people, she said, her voice faltering. What they love, what matters. I've never had that gift. The admission, small but seismic, left me speechless. The therapist Ellen recommended. She continued, looking away, says I need to acknowledge others' strengths without feeling diminished. I'm trying, Emily. It wasn't an apology, but it was a crack in her fortress of denial, a glimpse of vulnerability I'd never seen. The wedding ended with Clara and Nathan's first dance, a slow sway to an indie ballad we'd loved in college. As guests joined them on the dance floor, I felt a weight lift. Not fully, but enough to breathe easier. The road to healing was far from over, but we'd taken the first steps. In the weeks that followed, our family began group therapy, a tentative experiment in unraveling decades of dysfunction. Susan attended reluctantly at first, her defenses high, but small changes emerged, a willingness to listen, a flicker of accountability when confronted with her actions. Richard found his voice, speaking truths he'd suppressed for years. Clara and I strengthened our bond, our weekly brunches restored, now grounded in honesty rather than codependence. My own healing continued independently. Dr. Larson helped me set boundaries, not just with family, but in all relationships. I learned to recognize when my instinct to help veered into unhealthy territory, to value myself beyond what I could provide. 3 months after the wedding, during a hike in the Cascade Mountains, David proposed at a lookout overlooking snow-capped peaks and emerald valleys. Yes, I said, laughing through tears. But one condition: our wedding stays small. Just us. No drama. His laughter echoed across the valley, sealing our pact. 2 years later, in 2027, I held Clara's newborn son, Ethan James, his middle name a tribute that brought tears to my eyes. Our family was far from perfect. Susan's progress was uneven, with days of growth followed by slips into old patterns. Richard, revitalized by therapy, took up painting, a passion he'd abandoned decades ago. Clara and Nathan built a life rooted in trust, their home filled with art and laughter. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but choosing to build anew. Boundaries, I discovered, weren't barriers to love, but foundations for its healthiest expression. The journey from that devastating night in March, when Susan's words, "You're not welcome at the wedding," shattered my world, to where I stood now was neither direct nor easy. It demanded courage to face painful truths, wisdom to distinguish healthy relationships from toxic ones, and strength to demand the respect I deserved. If you're facing family betrayal, know that your worth isn't defined by others' actions. Sometimes, the hardest truths lead to the strongest healing, and the doors we close on toxicity open the way for love that endures.